So much of Roger Corman's reputation, beyond just his being a wonderful director, has been his giving the opportunities to so many filmmakers over the years. And whether, they point, of course, to Martin Scorsese, and they point to Jonathan Demme and Joe Dante and John Sayles and Ronnie Howard, and the list just goes on and on and on. But the first one who was there as a Corman acolyte was Francis Ford Coppola. Francis had won the Sam Goldwyn Prize for screenwriting, and he was kind of on his way, but where at that time nobody wanted to touch anybody who was a film student. That was like anathema. Who are these kids? Who needs them? Forget it. It was like wearing a scarlet letter. So Francis just said, well, the heck with it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work in the world of B movies. He even started with some nudie cuties. And he didn't care. He wanted the chance to make movies. So he became Roger Corman's right hand and just learned and learned and learned from Roger, as did another young up-and-coming, soon-to-be very fine filmmaker, Peter Bogdanovich. So Francis was doing dialogue directing. He did script polish on The Haunted Palace. He even recorded sound on The Young Racers. So Roger decides, okay, let me see what this kid can do. And so for the film group, he says, Francis, we're gonna be making a movie in Ireland. Here's a little extra money. Why don't you try and make a feature? But I want to see what you can do. So Coppola actually shot the opening to what would become Dementia 13.
You're always too greedy, Louise.
I just don't like to see her exploiting you. Honey, she's leaving all of your family's money to charity in the name of this mysterious Kathleen. It's ridiculous. Your mother is crazy.
You don't know anything about it.
I know that music's terrible.
Coppola had absolutely no idea what the movie was supposed to be, or even what the plot was, or anything. Juana Anders rowing a boat into the middle of a lake and jumping in the lake after tying a doll to some weights, and she dives into the water and finds a corpse and comes out of the water screaming, axed to death. And Roger said, oh, that's wonderful, go ahead. And he went with it. It became this kind of really interesting but more visually stunning piece about double-crossing families and trying to find out about a will and all this. It's kind of it's a little difficult to get all the pieces lined up in Dementia 13, but it showed so much talent, and Coppola's ability with the camera was just tremendous.
Is it the mother, demented by grief, or the attentive daughter-in-law, whose voice is soothingly hypnotic?
She'll tell me. I promise you.
Is it the son, who with fire creates beauty? Or the doctor who can cure and kill?
One of Francis's other projects was Battle Beyond the Sun. There was a Russian movie, Planet of Storms, and Roger had wanted Francis to go ahead and either shoot some new material and use the Russian film and its effects and what have you, or either dub it or something that would be economic enough so they could sell it to television. So Coppola decided to go ahead, shoot some new material that included really a vagina monster that was baked in the oven at Coppola's apartment. He said that almost got him evicted because it smelled, the rubber that burned up, and it smelled so terrible. And it's a little bit of a head scratcher, but you see also Francis, special music on Battle Beyond the Sun by his dad, Carmine Coppola, so this was quite a few years before The Godfather, but also the general scores for both Battle Beyond the Sun and Dementia 13 were done by Ronald Stein. And Coppola loved working with Ronnie Stein and brought him along on one of his major movies. And everybody seems to forget that Ron Stein did the music to The Rain People, which is a wonderful movie, and that was the film that opened up the major studio doors for Francis Coppola. And there was one of his Corman guys right with him when he made that movie.
Night Tide, with its boundless power, ties these two together in a love tainted by strange, sinister terror.
Roger's open door policy that he had for financing movies, he and Gene would listen to filmmakers, and they came in with ideas. They liked Curtis Harrington quite well, and he had a very interesting idea about a film, essentially about a mermaid. And Roger was doing very well at American International. He and Gene also had been doing separate independent productions for United Artists, like Tower of London. So they went ahead and decided to finance and that they would distribute a movie called Night Tide. Now, Curtis had befriended the actor Dennis Hopper, and Dennis had been blackballed from the studios. He had gotten into an issue with the very famous, for being tough, director Henry Hathaway on a movie called From Hell to Texas. And he didn't like Hathaway's direction, and so he refused to follow it. And Hathaway dug in his heels and he said, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sit here and I'm going to keep filming you until you do this scene correctly. And this is just this throwaway Western, really, from Fox with Don Murray. Very few people remember. It's not a bad movie. But this battle of wills just really exploded. And finally, Hopper was fired from the movie and essentially blackballed, not just by Henry Hathaway, who was fine, and he had a pretty quick temper, but 20th Century Fox was not pleased with Dennis Hopper at all. Now, this is Dennis Hopper after Rebel Without a Cause, after Giant. So he was really on his way up when he was under contract to Warner Brothers, and he was in the process of getting married to Brooke Hayward, whose father was Leland Hayward, one of the biggest and most powerful agents in the world. So Curtis Harrington shows Dennis Hopper the script, and Dennis loved it, and he was very fond of Curtis. And he knew that, okay, this is going to be a horror movie, but it's going to be a very unusual one with really with a ton of atmosphere and just a entirely different exploitation approach. Curtis had a very delicate touch with this film, and the movie turned out just beautifully, just so moody and atmospheric. And Hopper just plays a sailor on leave who runs across this beautiful woman, and she is in fact a mermaid. But it's all played absolutely straight. And he doesn't know if he's losing his mind, that he is so attracted to this woman, but is what he thinking accurate, or is he having some sort of mental collapse? It's a really, really terrific movie, and it did well. And Roger and Gene were able to place the film. Now, ironically for Dennis Hopper, who would then do another movie for Filmgroup and Curtis Harrington, Dennis came back to the major studios. And he got his break from Henry Hathaway, who decided to cast him as the weakling son in the John Wayne movie, The Sons of Katie Elder. Hopper used to love to tell the story that he went to Henry Hathaway, he did a scene exactly as Henry wanted him to do it, and he said, there, you see, Mr. Hathaway, I'm a better actor now. And Henry Hathaway supposedly said, Dennis, you were always a good actor, you're just smarter now.
She's gorgeous off of fresh blood.
She's a monster.
We have a good supply of blood plasma with us. We'll use that to feed her.
And if we run out of plasma, Commander?
However, he did return with Curtis Harrington for a film that has kind of a checkered history with the film group, because Roger Corman and Gene Corman actually financed the film Queen of Blood. And this was to be another movie culled from a Russian science fiction film that the Cormans had bought, and that additional scenes and new scenes would be put in, and they would take advantage of these gorgeous special effects that were featured in the Russian movie. And that was not always an easy task because you had certain things that were dubbed, and also both Coppola and Bogdanovich had said multiple times that the Russian movies were so beautifully made that they felt bad that they were chopping them up and pulling out these effect sequences and whatever, because he said, oh my gosh, I mean, these things were just gorgeous. But that was the job, and that's what they were doing to cut their teeth.
All right, unlock this door. Do you hear me? Unlock this door, I'm gonna shoot through the door.
I don't think you can think of the film group without thinking of The Terror. That great crazy quilt movie that had everybody from Francis Coppola to Jack Hill to Monty Hellman to Peter Bogdanovich. Everybody was contributing to that thing to try and figure out what to do with this extra footage of Boris Karloff that Roger Corman had ground through in a day on the set of The Raven, and then try to build something around it. And they effectively did it. What's so amazing is that all of these different creative forces actually somehow managed to interlace themselves into a single effort. The result is probably the film group movie, other than Little Shop of Horrors, that has had the most exposure. One reason being it was a very solid TV sale because it was in color, and of course it still starred Boris Karloff. The thing is with The Terror, of course, beautiful titles by Paul Julian, just so gorgeous and in color, and to see that stuff for the first time. It is really just this feast for the eyes, and then the story just kind of casts a spell over you, and somehow it all seems to work.
We will be together again, Victor. Together with our love here beneath the sea. Come to me, my love. Draw the veil. Look at me. And see how eagerly I await your embrace.
Bogdanovich finished Voyage to the Planet of the Prehistoric Women, and then was handed targets, or at least the problem of targets, which was, here is the Boris Karloff stuff. You can have him for an additional, I believe, 3 days. Do something with it. And of course, with Targets, that was a Roger Corman production that ended up being released by Paramount Pictures. So no film group, none of that, because it was that important and that impressive, which, of course, is the whole point of the Corman Film School. Give these guys a chance and let them impress the world, which, of course, they did. In the middle of all of this film group production, Roger and Jean Corman decided to move ahead with an adaptation of a Charles Beaumont novel called The Intruder. There was a lot of consternation about this because it was about a stranger who rolls into town, very much like Elmer Gantry, giving hate speeches to try and inflame local white residents to take violent action against any black people and African Americans who were living in the town. They had actually tried to get the film made with Tony Randall in the lead. And Tony Randall was doing quite well at that time, but nobody would touch it because of the controversy surrounding it. Roger had made a deal with Pathé Labs when he made the movie The Premature Burial. And that was so he could actually, in that case, he was going to try and own and distribute that film himself. American International stepped in and stopped that. But Pathé agreed to put up the money to make The Intruder, and Roger did. It is the movie that Roger Corman has said he was, in fact, the most proud of. William Shatner is the rabble-rouser, and he is absolutely tremendous. And the film is so unblinking in its look at racial tensions in the United States. It's really startling. It's harsh as hell, and it's violent and very intense. And Charles Beaumont, who wrote the script himself and had worked on other scripts for Roger, including The Premature Burial, he had very bad health, but he is also in the movie as one of the townspeople who Shatner really gets them up against hating black people. The movie is, I think it's the Filmgroup masterpiece, because it is so completely, there's no Creatures from Haunted Seas, there's no Boris Karloff, there is none of the quote-unquote exploitation elements, but there are. It is a straight drama. It is a searing drama, but it is also something that you could play off in a drive-in saying, oh boy, you're not going to believe how intense and hot this movie is, and it talks about all the taboos and all of this type of stuff, which unfortunately is exactly what happened to the movie. Pathé and the Cormans did put the film out, and it did not the best. Some of the reviews were very positive because they felt the film was brave. Others, not so much so. Roger, later on, despite the incredibly inflammatory nature of the movie, he actually said he thought the film was too much of a lecture, which it definitely is not. But I think he was trying to sort out in his mind about why the film essentially failed to find an audience. And it failed, I believe, just because it was so uncomfortable for people to look at this movie and maybe come face to face with either their own prejudices or just their own fears of what would happen if a small town actually ignited into a race war. People were not ready for that yet. They were fine with the Defiant Ones, whatever, but this was all kind of by inches to get audience acceptance and what have you, and for films that touched on these sensitive issues to make any money. The Intruder was a leap, and people weren't ready for a leap. So Roger and Gene had to sell the film to a sub-distributor, and it was played out under different titles, including I Hate Your Guts, at drive-ins and what have you, and slowly was eking money back. And Roger Corman has always said this was the film for which he did not make any money.
No matter where you go or what you do or whom you kill, I'll love you till the day I die.
The Filmgroup existed because Roger Corman was not happy with the accounting on some of his other movies. It was economic necessity. It was something he wanted to do to try and, if you will, even the books and be properly rewarded for his movie-making efforts, and his brother joined him. But what happened was they ended up creating, almost accidentally, these wonderful, offbeat, at times searingly truthful, and at other times way better made little movies than, if you will, just thinking in terms of pure commercialism or pure economic terms. No, they were bringing talent to what they were doing. They were bringing artistic choice to what they were doing. And since the Filmgroup was their own company, they had nobody leaning over their shoulder telling them yes or no. And now you go to those movies, and you look at those movies, and it's whether it's Audrey opening up in the Mushnik's flower shop demanding blood, it's the Creature from the Haunted Sea popping up next to the boat with those ping pong ball eyes. And you're like, oh my God, what is that thing? Or Sandra Knight dissolving into just a pile of skeletal goo at the end of the terror. And that is the power of what the film group created. Yes, they were doing these funky little movies to make money, but they were bringing their own vision and art to those films, and so many of the film group movies actually still do have a life of their own because they had impact on their audiences.